morning, dear children. Today we begin with Chapter 4, the United Nations. First, let us understand how and why the United Nations was created. In August 1914, the First World War broke out in Europe when the industrialized nations of the world became jealous of each other's power, and each country wanted to grow its own empire. The war caused death and destruction and severe shortage of food. After few years of peace, Second World War broke out in September 1939 and it ended in 1945 after USA dropped atomic bombs over two Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Second World War was much more destructive than the First World War. After the Second World War, many nations of the world came together to find ways of preventing wars in future. As a result of their efforts, the United Nations came into being in the year 1945. A set of rules called the Charter of the United Nations was made at a conference in San Francisco, USA. It was signed by 50 member countries on 24th October 1945. Today, 193 countries are members of the United Nations. Aims of the United Nations: to maintain international peace and security. The main aim of United Nations is to prevent war. Sometimes when there is danger of war between two nations, the UN sends a military force called the Peacekeeping Force to prevent the war. To develop friendly relations between nations. To encourage respect for human rights and the freedom of all the people. To achieve international cooperation in solving economic and social problems. To help fight diseases and preserve the environment. The principles of the United Nations. All countries that are member of the United Nations are equal, however developed or underdeveloped they may be. All countries that are members of the United Nations must obey the Charter. Countries must try to settle their differences by peaceful means. The United Nations will not interfere in the domestic affairs of any country. Structure of the United Nations. The United Nations has 6 different organs or bodies that have different functions. They are the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Secretariat, the Economic and Social Council, the International Court of Justice, the Trusteeship Council. The General Assembly is the main organ of the UN. It is made up of all 193 member countries. Each country has one vote. It meets every year. Decisions on all actions of the United Nations are held in the General Assembly. The Security Council. The Security Council is the most powerful organ of the UN. It is responsible for maintaining international peace and for restoring peace if a war breaks out. The Security Council has 15 members. 5 of them have permanent seats. These are the United States of America, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China. The other 10 members are elected each for 2 years. The Secretariat. The people who work in the UN, that is the staff members, form the Secretariat. It carries out the day-to-day work of the UN. The head of the Secretariat is the Secretary General. He or she carries out the decisions of the Security Council and is a powerful person. The Secretary General is chosen for 5 years by the General Assembly. Economic and Social Council. The Economic and Social Council works under the General Assembly. It looks after those programs of the UN which provides help to developing nations. It also looks after the programs related to education, health and culture. The International Court of Justice. The court's role is to settle in accordance with international law legal issues between countries. The court is composed of 15 judges elected for a term of 9 years. Trusteeship Council was set up to administer and support the nations that were not independent then. So children, this was all about the formation of the United Nations, its aims, principles, and the main organs of the United Nations. Thank you.